I am a 35-year-old man named Heath York. My life is busy every day right now, but it's rewarding in its own unique way. The time I spend with my family is priceless, and I love my profession. I never imagined getting married, but now I have a wife and 2 small kids. I thought no woman would ever be interested in me because I had only completed middle school. In general, women favor males who have greater educational backgrounds than they do. It should come as no surprise that graduates of highly esteemed national or competitive universities are typically well-liked. After all, graduates of these institutions are typically very talented. I didn't even finish high school, but I still wanted to attend college. After middle school, I was forced to start working, even though I truly enjoyed learning. I was up in a very impoverished home with only one mother. It barely mattered, even with child support assistance. Every day we lived on the brink. In addition, my mother only completed middle school, so she lacked credentials and had very few career options. She also had poor health, which made it difficult for her to go to work. Cleaning was her profession, but it was physically taxing, and she would get sick often. Pickles from a cheap grocery shop, thin miso soup, and basic white rice were our daily meals. We did occasionally eat meat, but it was always only tiny bits. I used to eat my plain white rice and watch steak on TV because I had never ever eaten one before. Rice was rationed though. We were only permitted to eat 1 little bowl every day. 1 little bowl a day was insufficient, even though it was just the 2 of us. As a growing youngster, I would visit a nearby bakery to obtain freed bread crusts because I was always hungry. However, the class leader, Matthew, made fun of me mercilessly after learning about it. "Are you really consuming free bread crusts? That's less than 1 animal in a zoo. My dog even eats better than you do. He receives premium dog food and fresh, locally sourced beef. For only 4 pounds, it costs $80. That costs more than ordinary rice. Yes, that is some high-end dog chow. Your dog eats a lot. But really, please don't bother me. You don't care about what I eat, do you?" In fact, it does. People from other classes will start claiming that we all have poverty germs if there is a poor child in this class. It's not just you who has this issue. Man, be careful what you do. Exactly. If people start calling our whole class too poor because of you, that's messed up. I don't want to be labeled like that. Isaac, who always stuck to Matthew like a shadow, also joined in, throwing mean comments my way. It wasn't like I wanted to eat bread crusts. I did it because I had no other choice. If I had more money, I would eat more of the foods I wanted. For example, I would have raw fish sushi and the steak I've always wanted to try, things I rarely got to eat. And I wanted snacks too. Sometimes, I would stick my hand under vending machines, hoping to find dropped coins. On lucky days, I'd find a $1 coin, which I secretly used to buy cheap snacks. I knew it was wrong, but as a starving kid, I had no other options. Back then, I didn't even know middle schoolers could get part-time jobs, so that was the only way I could keep from going hungry. I also couldn't afford most of the school supplies I needed. Since we had no money, I wore hand-me-down uniforms from neighbors, and even my gym clothes were secondhand. Both the uniform and gym clothes were so worn out that anyone could tell at a glance how shabby they were. We were allowed to use any type of bag for school, but I couldn't afford the standard student bag that everyone else had. Instead, I used a drawstring bag I had made in my elementary school home economics class. Because of that, I was relentlessly mocked, and people started calling me Patchy as a nickname. To be fair, no middle schooler used a handmade drawstring bag from elementary school. It looked childish and honestly pretty lame. But I had no other bag to carry my textbooks and supplies. If I had money, I would have bought everything new. Still, I couldn't blame my mother. She raised me all by herself, and no matter how sick she felt, she still went to work. I wanted to grow up quickly so I could help her. To do that, I needed an education and a well-paying job. My mother always told me, education is the key to escaping poverty. I remember hearing a similar story about a comedian, Kyle. A comedian from a poor background, he was a kid who spent more time playing than studying. Watching his biographical drama, I assumed his family couldn't afford to invest in education. But his mother was incredibly passionate about learning and constantly pushed Kyle to study. Kyle didn't like studying, but because his mother was so insistent, he eventually started putting in the effort. He also had an older brother who was an excellent student, and maybe he didn't want to lose to him. In the end, Kyle got into a prestigious private university. But once there, he discovered comedy and ended up dropping out. His mother was furious at first, but as Kyle gradually gained fame, she couldn't hide her happiness. However, making a living as a comedian is tough unless you become a big star. Even after appearing on TV, Kyle still had to work part-time jobs. Then, one day, he got a call from his older brother with shocking news. His mother had collapsed from a sudden illness. The same mother who had always nagged him to study. The same mother who had kept his pocket money for him. Kyle never really liked his mother, but she was still his parent. So he rushed to the hospital. Lying weak in bed with an IV, his mother took something out of a drawer and handed it to him. It was a bank book under Kyle's name. To his surprise, it showed a balance of over $100,000. His mother had been saving for him, setting aside money from her part-time job and depositing all the pocket money she had kept. With a smile, she told him, "If I had given it to you earlier, you would have spent it all." She knew she didn't have much time left and wanted him to use that money to support himself. Kyle had always thought his mother was strict and cold, but at that moment, he finally realized how deep her love was and broke down in tears. Watching that story, I thought Kyle's mother had a point. Even though Kyle dropped out of university, the university later awarded him an honorary degree. Even though he didn't complete all his coursework, he contributed to the world as both a comedian and a film director, gaining international recognition. It convinced me that education was necessary to achieve greatness. So despite the struggles, I buried myself in my studies during middle school. But life doesn't always go the way you want. My mother fell ill and started being hospitalized repeatedly. She had no health insurance, so the medical bills were incredibly high. As a middle schooler, I had no idea about financial aid programs like the high-cost medical expense system. I just kept paying the hospital bills from my mother's meager savings. As that continued, I realized I probably wouldn't be able to go to high school. While everyone talked about which high school they wanted to attend, I was left out of the conversation. I wanted to keep studying in high school and eventually go to university, but for someone as poor as me, it was impossible. Around that time, I finally learned that middle schoolers were allowed to do certain types of part-time jobs. So, I started delivering newspapers. I also helped out at a local bakery in exchange for a small tip. Technically, they weren't supposed to hire a middle schooler, but they let me work under the pretense of helping out. Along with my small payment, they also let me take home bread crusts and leftover bread. By then, my mother could no longer prepare my school lunches, so I survived on the bread I brought home. Still, there were different types of bread, savory ones, sweet pastries, so I never really got bored of eating them. I was just grateful to have food. But since I ate bread every single day, I ended up getting a new nickname. Krusty. Yo, still eating bread again? That one looks kind of stale though. Guess that's what poor folks eat. My family only buys bread from fancy bakeries, you know. We only get freshly baked baguettes and loaves that cost $9 each. But hey, you're rock bottom poor, so I guess you don't have a choice. Huh. For real, Krusty. How do you not get sick of that stuff? You must be seriously lacking nutrients. Is that why you're so scrawny? No muscle at all. Look at me. I've got abs. But you never even get to eat real meat. Honestly, that's just sad. Yeah, He probably gets to eat meat like once a year, and even then, just scraps. I bet he's never had steak in his life. Damn, that's rough. Man, I almost feel bad for you. The truth was, I really had never eaten steak. I hadn't even smelled it before. Even the scraps of meat I had were so rare that I couldn't argue back. I just kept my head down and ate my bread, but my tears made it taste salty. Seeing me cry, Matthew and Isaac took it as an invitation to mock me even more. Why did they hate me so much? What had I ever done to them? Then, high school entrance exam season came, but I didn't take any exams. I had already given up on going to high school. My homeroom teacher said it was a shame, but I had already accepted it as my fate. Instead, I found a place that was willing to hire me. It was the bakery that had been giving me small tips for helping out. They offered me a part-time job, and I was incredibly grateful. The baker's wife knew about my mother's illness and would sometimes pack leftover homemade side dishes for me to take home. I felt truly lucky to be working for such kind-hearted people. While everyone else was in high school, I was working at the bakery every day. Sometimes, I'd see high school students in their uniforms coming in to buy bread in the morning. Seeing them made me feel a little sad. If I had money, I would have been wearing a uniform and going to high school too. But I couldn't burden my mother any further. Now, it was my turn to support her. No matter how painful it felt, I threw myself into my work. Eventually, I left the bakery and started a different job. It's a busy job, but I enjoy my life now. And as fate would have it, I ended up marrying a woman who used to be a customer at the bakery. Now, I'm happily living my life with her and our kids. I really have no complaints. One day, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was an invitation to a middle school reunion. I wasn't particularly excited about it, but I was curious to see how everyone had turned out. What had they become? I was already a 35-year-old dad, so surely everyone else had become middle-aged too. When I arrived at the reunion venue, a large group of men and women were chatting away. Among them, one voice stood out loud and clear. It was Matthew. He looked pretty much the same, still youthful. Maybe he wasn't married yet. Not that it mattered, but single people do tend to look younger. Hey, if it isn't Krusty. Long time, no see. How's life? Not bad. What about you, Matthew? I'm doing amazing. I'm about to start my own company. I already quit my old job. See, I was never meant to be one of the used. I was born to be the one in charge. But hey, you're still at the bottom, right? Weren't you working at that tiny, rundown bakery? Man, I could never do that. Too embarrassing. Yeah, I mean, he's a middle school graduate. No skills, no real options. That was Isaac. Still hanging on to Matthew like always. He hadn't changed at all. Still had that same nasty look in his eyes. I was about to ignore them, but then Matthew hit me with another arrogant remark. You know, Krusty, you should really show me some respect. I just got a $50 million investment from a major company. Bow down, man. Then, out of nowhere, he splashed his drink all over me, laughing obnoxiously. He and his cronies howled in amusement. I was completely soaked. Yeah, Krusty, you better start showing us some respect. Oh, and by the way, Matthew's going to be the CEO, and I'm going to be the vice president. Without missing a beat, I responded, oh yeah. Well, that deal's off the table now. Huh. What the hell are you talking about? You lost your mind or something. Did he finally snap? That's hilarious. Nah, I'm serious. You guys should start worrying about yourselves instead of laughing. I'm saying you're not getting any investment. Oh, wait, do I need to spell it out for you? The CEO of that major corporation is me. What? What the hell did you just say? Quit messing around. There's no way in hell you're the CEO of Japan Food Corp. Well, actually, I am. Back when I worked at the bakery, I handled sourcing wheat and eggs. People told me I had a good eye for quality, and I started to find real joy in evaluating food ingredients. So, I founded Japan Food Corp, a company dedicated to sourcing the finest ingredients from around the world. No way. You're seriously the CEO of that company. But we were planning to make money in the food industry too. This is insane. You're just a middle school graduate. Just because someone didn't go to high school doesn't mean they can't do anything. If you work hard, there are always people who recognize your efforts. And if you have a vision, you can carve out your own path, even build your own company. Growing up poor, I had an obsession with food. What I wanted to eat and what people considered truly delicious. But becoming a CEO because of that. I studied food relentlessly. What makes something taste good and what people desire. I bought and tested all kinds of food, researched the market, and developed a deep understanding of flavors. That's how Japan Food Corp grew and became successful. Yes, I had to become the CEO of a massive corporation. While working at the bakery, I learned how to judge the quality of ingredients. My childhood hunger and fascination with food fueled my desire to learn more, and that passion eventually led me to establish my own company. By the way, my company generates $8,000 million in annual revenue. So, a $50 million investment was pocket change. But I had already decided I wasn't going to invest in you guys. Actually, the whole investment deal wasn't even my decision. It was my executive director, Marcus, who arranged it behind my back. Turns out, Marcus had taken bribes from you guys to push the investment through. Once I found out, I planned to shut the whole thing down. I originally had no interest in attending the reunion, but once I learned about the bribery, I decided to go and settle things. By the way, you guys were expecting an investment from Marcus, right? You bribed him, didn't you? You really thought that was okay? Oh, well, we didn't bribe anyone. It was just a business dinner. Oh yeah? Giving someone $30,000 in cash is just a business dinner now. That's a hell of a thing to say. I wouldn't have the guts to claim that. But hey, don't worry. You're definitely going to be punished for it. I'll make sure of it. When I said I would rat them out to the police, Matthew and Isaac turned even paler. They looked as pale as green apples. Then they begged me, pleading desperately not to call the police. Please, just don't go to the cops. I don't want my life to be over like this. If this gets out, it'll ruin my future. I have a family. I can't let them suffer because of this. So what? I have a family too. If you really cared about yours, you wouldn't have done something so stupid. I bet your wife would be devastated to hear what you've been up to. I'm engaged. I promised my fiancée a future. Please, don't report this. I'm begging you. That's not happening. Some things are just non-negotiable. You crossed the line, and there's no coming back from it. No. What are we supposed to do? Wait. How about this? We'll get on our knees and apologize. That'll make it right, won't it? Please. Oh, so now you're getting on your knees and apologizing. Yeah, we'll do that. Right here. Please, just let this go. Well, I didn't need that. I didn't need their pathetic display. But they threw themselves to the ground, crying and begging anyway. Even so, I had no intention of letting them off the hook. If Boeing could fix everything, they wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. My decision is final. I'm not investing in you, and I will report you to the police. So rest easy. You bastard. We bowed to you. Don't get cocky. You used to be a broke, weak loser. Yeah, don't you dare look down on us. Just give us the investment already. Oh? Are you threatening me now? Well, that makes things even easier. I guess I have no choice but to take legal action. Looks like I'll be heading to the police station after this. Wait. No. Please stop. Don't do this. You'll ruin our lives. As if they had any right to say that. They were the ones who had ruined my childhood. I had wanted to make good memories in middle school, but because of those guys, all I got was humiliation and misery. Now that they were the ones suffering, I figured it was just karma for everything they did in the past. Life isn't that easy. You reap what you sow. I turned on my heel and walked out of the reunion venue. Then, I headed straight to the police station. I had no sympathy for them anymore. They deserved whatever punishment was coming their way. At the police station, I reported that Matthew and Isaac had bribed Marcus. I also exposed Marcus for eagerly accepting their bribe. How did I know about the bribery? There was a reason. My company's secretary happened to witness the whole thing. Not only that, but she secretly recorded it and sent the video to me. With solid evidence like that, there was no way those three would escape punishment. The footage went like this. Ah, I really appreciate this. No, the pleasure is ours. We never expected to get a $50 million investment. Well, your company is an essential partner for Japan Food Corp, so this amount is nothing. I'm sure Mr. York will approve it afterward. That would be wonderful. Here, please accept this token of our gratitude. What's this? Wait, is this a stack of cash? Yes, exactly. It looks pretty thick. Just between us, there's about $30,000 in there. Oh my, you guys sure are bad, handing over a bribe like this. Well, we have to maintain a good relationship. This is just part of the game. Please take this as a gesture of our appreciation, Marcus the Great. Oh, stop it. Flattering me won't get you anything extra. Ha ha. They were laughing like idiots in the hallway, never realizing they were being watched. I couldn't believe how stupid they were to expose themselves like that. Shortly after, Marcus, Matthew, and Isaac were arrested. Matthew's big business plan crumbled before it even started, leaving him with nothing but debt. They had already invested in machinery and equipment, spending a large amount of money on them. It seemed they used specialized machines, each costing anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. They had gone on a reckless spending spree, only to be left with nothing but crushing debt. Technically, bribery laws usually apply to public officials, but in some cases, they also apply to certain private individuals. For example, CEOs and executives of companies can still be charged with bribery offenses. In addition, their actions could also be considered a breach of trust, which carries serious penalties. Since Matthew was supposed to become a CEO, he was likely to face a harsh sentence. Not that I cared. Whatever happened to them next was none of my business. They could rot in prison for all I cared. And after that, they could struggle under the weight of their debt and suffer through hell. In the end, it was decided that Matthew and the others would go to prison. Matthew's wife, disgusted, took their child and left, filing for divorce. Isaac's fiancée also dumped him. Clearly, neither of them wanted to be associated with a criminal. If I were in their shoes, I'd have done the same thing. Losing their families, Matthew and Isaac finally realized the gravity of their crimes. They desperately pleaded with their lawyers to save them, but it was too late. Their crimes were too severe, and there was nothing that could be done. With this, everything was finally settled. If I had let things continue unchecked, I might have ended up being held responsible too. People could have accused me of failing to supervise my own executive, which would have put me in serious trouble. From now on, I want to put more effort into employee education to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. Bribes, whether giving or receiving, bring nothing but trouble. Receiving money without any effort is dangerous. Once someone gets a taste for easy money, they start believing they can make a living off of it. I firmly believe that money should be earned through hard work. I struggled immensely to make money since I only had a middle school education, but looking back, it was a valuable experience. When I started my newspaper delivery job in middle school, waking up early was so hard. I was always exhausted in class. But I forced myself to wake up at 2 or 3 a.m., head to the office, and bike around town delivering newspapers, all for the sake of supporting my mother. At first, helping out at the bakery was also hard because I was carrying heavy things, especially since the baker's wife was pregnant back then. I carried the heavy items for her so she wouldn't have to. After finishing middle school, I worked part-time at the bakery, watching students in their uniforms head off to school with a sense of frustration. I wanted to go to high school so badly, but we didn't have the money, so I had to give up on that dream. Looking back, maybe things could have worked out if we had applied for welfare assistance. But at the time, I had no knowledge of such things, and no one ever told me about them. So I simply swallowed my frustration and worked. Still, that experience taught me the true value of money. My wages weren't great, but at least I could see the direct results of my hard work in the form of cash. With my first paycheck from the bakery, I bought my mother strawberries, her favorite fruit. She had always said that fruit was too expensive, but she often reminisced about the taste of strawberries from when she was younger. When I gave them to her, she ate them while tears streamed down her face. She kept thanking me for buying something so luxurious, which made me feel a little embarrassed. I remember that the strawberries were high-end, costing about $10 per pack. I couldn't afford to take her to a fancy restaurant, so this was the least I could do to make her happy. Now, I'm a CEO and have built wealth, but I probably understand the value of money better than anyone. That's why I can't stand bribery. Buying people's trust with money is inherently wrong. Trust isn't something you purchase, it's something you build. I always think about what I can do to make others happy and act accordingly. Trust is built when my actions produce results and help the other person understand my intentions. Since that incident, my company has improved significantly. I committed to organizational reform and implemented strict training for my employees. At first, many of them resisted the idea of undergoing training, but after actually experiencing it, they started to feel more motivated to contribute to the company and society. I brought in top-class instructors to conduct professional etiquette training. Ideally, this kind of training should have been done when they first joined the company, but I had been too busy to prioritize it. I reflected on my own negligence and resolved to be more mindful moving forward. As my employees started working with more enthusiasm, I felt even more motivated to improve the company. It was a win-win situation. I don't demand absolute loyalty from my employees, nor do I expect them to blindly obey. But at the very least, they need to understand the difference between right and wrong. That's why I insisted they undergo this training. Watching the process was enlightening for me as well, and I plan to continue these programs in the future. I believe that when the leader continues to learn, it positively influences the entire team. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to attend high school or university. My formal education stopped at middle school, but I've come to realize that school education isn't everything. What you learn in school is just the foundation for life. The real lessons come from actual experience in society. This training was a perfect example of that. You don't learn this kind of thing in school, so at first, many employees looked nervous. Even I felt a bit anxious just observing from the back of the room. Watching the strict instructors drill discipline into my employees made me break out in a sweat. But since all of this benefits society, I have to endure it. Even training sessions that seem unreasonable at first are actually full of useful lessons. I decided that from now on, I would actively seek out opportunities to learn and absorb as much knowledge as possible. As the CEO, I needed to keep learning so that my employees would also develop a thirst for knowledge. If they acquired new skills, they could apply them to their work, making the company even stronger. For example, in accounting, having a bookkeeping certification would make tasks much more efficient. But not all employees had it, meaning senior staff had to train the newer ones from scratch. So I thought about how to fix this. That's when I decided to introduce e-learning as part of our company's employee benefits. The company would cover all costs, and if an employee earned a qualification, their salary would increase accordingly. Other companies apparently offer only about $100 in certification allowances. But since I want employees to make the most of their skills for the company, I set it at $500. Since my company was thriving, this was an investment I could afford. As a result, more employees started dedicating themselves to self-improvement. I even allowed them to study during downtime at work if it contributed to the company's success. Many of them obtained new qualifications and became experts in their fields. Productivity increased, and the company became even more dynamic. Of course, sales skyrocketed as well. And now, my company's revenue exceeds $10 billion. It took significant investments to get here, but those investments have more than paid off. Spending money on education was never a mistake. Then, I remembered the story of Kyle, the comedian. Kyle's mother insisted that he pursue academics because she believed that education could help him in life. She must have repeatedly told him to study for that reason. As a kid, I wanted to escape poverty through education. I thought if I studied hard and got into a prestigious university, I could land a good job. But what exactly is a good job? What kind of work is considered valuable by society? In the end, I didn't go to high school and started working at a bakery. But even that was an important job. After all, we were feeding people. When I was younger, I believed that getting into a good company meant earning a stable income. But that's not what life is all about. Even if you graduate from a top university and land a high-paying job, you could still lose everything, just like Matthew did. Following the right path doesn't always guarantee success. What truly matters is constantly learning, improving, and gaining skills. It took me until this age to realize it, but I wish I had known sooner. If I had, I wouldn't have spent my youth drowning in feelings of inferiority. But in a way, those feelings fueled my hunger for success. If I had just wallowed in self-pity instead, I wouldn't have accomplished anything. So maybe feeling inferior isn't always a bad thing. If someone out there is struggling with those emotions, I want them to cherish that feeling. It's painful, and constantly comparing yourself to others isn't healthy. But if you deny your own struggles, you risk denying yourself entirely. It's normal to want to climb higher and gain recognition. So I want you to think carefully about how to fulfill that desire. And once it's fulfilled, what matters most is how you give back to society. I still have a long way to go, but I have big plans for my next business venture. I'm going to expand the bakery that once helped me into a nationwide chain, because I want everyone to experience the simple joy of good, affordable bread. What's the matter? Are you all right? She told me she hadn't eaten in days when I questioned her. The woman's hair was in disarray, and her clothes were filthy. Her untidy hair obscured most of her face, giving her the appearance of a cursed ghost from a horror film. She also had a heavy body odor and hadn't taken a bath. She's homeless, I see. That makes sense, I suppose, but I had no idea that women might also be homeless. I was thinking of my father's advice as I was ready to pass her. Don't ignore people in need. Unaware that this could result in my losing my job, I paused and extended my hand to the woman. People are valuable. Constantly lend a hand to others and value the relationships you form. Never betray yourself, even if someone betrays you, and don't ignore someone who is in need. My father taught me that. I used to fight a lot as a kid. I grew up in a housing development where kids my age would frequently run around the vacant lots. Boys played baseball most of the time, and they frequently got into arguments with kids from adjacent areas about who may use the vacant lot. We used to settle disputes between youngsters on our own because parents didn't step in to break them up back then. But my father would say terrible things to me at dinner every time he learned that I had gotten into a fight. I wasn't very interested in what he stated when I was younger. My dad died of a disease when I was in upper elementary school. Those words have flooded back to me every time I pray at his altar ever since. As a memento and a manual for my life, I have taken my father's words with me. Despite having good marks in high school, I immediately started working after graduation because I was raised in a single-parent home with limited resources. I was employed by a large corporation due to my strong grades, which was uncommon for someone with just a high school degree. My mother was overjoyed that I had landed a job at such a large corporation after only completing high school. She had been feeble, but she appeared to get stronger when I offered her the position. Everybody else at my employment had graduated from either elite private schools or renowned national colleges. As a recent high school graduate, I didn't feel like I belonged, yet everyone appreciated my effort and commitment. I was given the chance to participate in a project as I kept up my hard work, and it ended up being a success. The project's senior leader, Kenneth, gave me credit for my work. He recognized the accuracy of my work, my analytical abilities, my attention to detail, and my document arrangement. Thanks to you, the project was successful, he added. You were a huge assistance to us. Thank you, he said, and conveyed his appreciation. In retrospect, I believe Kenneth's remarks were intended to inspire me even more. My manager, Tyler, then called me in and informed me that another project was underway, with a potential $30 million value if it were successful. I was brought on board to work on this new initiative. It was tremendously motivating to be chosen to participate in such a significant endeavor with my college-educated seniors, and I was overjoyed. I was determined to finish the project and catch up to the others, so I studied every day. The more I worked, the more results I got, and the more recognition I received, despite the fact that the organization was full of highly educated individuals. People are precious, always help one another, and cherish the bonds you make. Recalling what my father had said, I was really happy with the setting, where I was forming an increasing number of relationships through my employment. I didn't have a significant other, and ever since I started working for the company, my full attention has been on my work. One day, Tyler then revealed that a new employee would be joining the business. The newcomer, Kevin, was apparently a relative of Mr. Harrison, the president. A graduate of Tokyo University, he was also renowned for his extraordinary intelligence. Since he was a mid-career hire and far older than I was, I prepared myself to remain competitive. I had no idea how drastically my life would change with Kevin's arrival. I trained Kevin like a new hire when he started working there. To be honest, it felt strange because he was so much older than me, but I reasoned that it would be best to teach him properly so that he could pick things up quickly. I therefore went over everything with him. He didn't like being treated like a novice, though, and would frequently grimace as though to say, "I don't need you to tell me that." I put up with his attitude while I taught him the work for a few months. Kevin received a promotion to section chief around 6 months later. He advanced through the ranks swiftly, as might be anticipated from a relative of Mr. Harrison. After a year, we switched places, and I was working beneath him. Wow, already a section chief, and he barely knows his job. I heard top staff members say things like that. Kevin was slow to learn, despite the efforts of his coworkers to teach him. Is he really a graduate of Tokyo University? Some even began to wonder about that. Despite its size, this business is family-owned. A few of the board members are Mr. Harrison's family. Kevin would, of course, eventually become one of them. Despite their frustration with his incapacity to understand the task, the senior staff reluctantly treated Kevin with respect because they did not want to lose their position in the company and understood that if news got to the board, it would mean the end of their careers. Kevin began assigning his own menial responsibilities to his subordinates as his status rose. As a manager, I'm too busy to deal with these pointless duties. Would you please enter this data for me, Kyle? He has been throwing all of his work at me lately. When other staff members seek him for help, he urges them to consult someone else because he never handles the specifics himself. He simply doesn't have the answers, to be honest. The senior staff abruptly transfers all of the work to me, his direct subordinate, with no intention of taking up Kevin's slack. They deftly stay out of the way. They are very astute in this regard. I foolishly take these assignments because I lack the calculation to avoid them, which adds to my already heavy workload. But even with all of these added duties, I still had to complete my primary obligations during regular business hours. I was always the one who took the blame when complaints came in. Kevin never accepted accountability. The individual who had done the work was invariably the one he moved it upon. This compelled me to further increase the precision of my own work. I discovered that my skill level had unintentionally increased as I spent my days immersed in work, and I developed a reputation inside the organization for being able to complete things accurately and swiftly. However, incapacity was not a justification for this enormous $30 million endeavor. Kevin would just respond, "Look, you're a high school graduate, so you handle it," when I tried to make time to help him catch up with the rest of the squad. "In any case, you're quick at these stuff." "Kevin, you won't be able to make accurate decisions when something goes wrong if you don't get involved in the work yourself," I would respond. "You can stay up with the senior staff as the project develops if you get started right away." I gave him this advice out of charity, but he always found a way to avoid doing it. Rather, he was quick to join the senior staff at any social function or client meeting. "Kyle, would you please review this document?" With a broad smile, he would remark, "I'm counting on you because I have a client dinner," hastily getting ready and heading out of the office with the others. The other team members would look at Kevin with skepticism as he left. Even staff members who had never met Kevin before began to inquire as the project went along, "Kyle, is Kevin truly qualified to work on this project?" Nothing seems to make sense to him. His credentials started to be questioned by more and more people. There wasn't even a resume on file for Kevin, and someone from another department who had joined the project claimed that he had been hired due to his familial connections to Mr. Harrison. Given how competent the senior staff was, Kevin's incapacity made him stand out among the others on the team. Because he was related to Mr. Harrison, no one dared to bring it to Tyler, even though normally someone like him would have been kicked off the project. In reality, Kevin wasn't given a lot of work to do on this project. He was really only a symbolic boss. Nevertheless, the team found it unacceptable that Kevin would just sit about and act arrogant. Even when the senior staff attempted to give him assignments, Kevin was unable to manage them, and they ultimately returned to me. As a result, the team began to severely question his qualifications from Tokyo University. One day, he started talking to Jacob, a senior coworker who had graduated from Tokyo University. "I've heard that you received your degree from Tokyo University, Kevin. After all these time, it's good to speak with a fellow graduate." Jacob remarked nostalgically, "I heard you passed on your first try. Impressive." Kevin first smiled in return, but his answers became more evasive when Jacob started inquiring about the department he was in and the instructors he had studied under. The whole Tokyo University graduate thing. It's something Tyler started saying on his own, he finally acknowledged. I didn't say that. Those of us in the vicinity who were listening weren't shocked. We were all disappointed to have our suspicions validated because we had all suspected as much. There were murmurs, is this a case of resume fraud? However, Kevin had never explicitly stated that he was a graduate of Tokyo University himself, as Tyler had introduced him to the idea. Nevertheless, we had a project to finish, so we ignored Kevin and concentrated on the task at hand. I got up earlier than normal on the day of the client meeting to review the papers one last time. I wanted to make sure everything was in order because Kevin was supposed to show the client the documentation we had produced. I was taking a shortcut through a small park after purchasing a sandwich from a nearby convenience store when I noticed a woman lying on the ground. I rushed to her after stuffing the sandwich into my mouth. She was in a fetal position, curled up, gripping her tummy. "What's the matter?" "Are you all right?" I inquired. She claimed to have gone days without eating. She was a weak woman with a tangled mess of hair and dirty clothes. The majority of her face was hidden by her long hair, which was slung down her back. She had the appearance of a cursed ghost, something from a horror film. She also had a strong body odor and had obviously not taken a bath in a long time. I thought, oh, she's homeless. I guess that makes sense, but I didn't know women could be homeless too. Thinking there was nothing I could do, I was going to leave her there when I suddenly remembered my father's advice. Don't walk past someone in need. With the intention of giving her some cash so she could purchase some food, I paused and grabbed my wallet. But as I gave her a closer look, I saw that something wasn't quite right. She was breathing heavily, and I could see perspiration on her pale face through the tangle of her untidy hair. She appeared to be in excruciating discomfort. I concluded that she was ill, not just hungry. I thus dialed an ambulance. She struggled on while she waited for the ambulance. Despite her filthy look and heavy stink, I carefully lifted her up and placed her on a nearby bench because I couldn't just leave her lying on the ground. The paramedics hurried over as the ambulance finally pulled up, sirens blaring. They took her to the hospital after I gave them the rundown. I felt sad for her as they hoisted her onto the stretcher. I gave her all of the money in my wallet and instructed her to use it for her medical care. "This is too much. I can't accept it," she began, but I turned her over to the paramedics before she could continue, and I walked out of the park. I heard her yell, "Wait, please," as I turned to leave, but I didn't turn around. The fear of being late for the client meeting consumed me. As I was walking, I looked at my watch and saw that I was already running late. I thought, damn, I'm going to be late too. I began running as quickly as I could. Breathless, I walked into the client's office, introduced myself, and told the receptionist why I was there. I rushed to the elevator after being told to go to the meeting room on the 12th floor. Although the elevator went extremely quickly and the building was 30 stories high, the ride to the 12th story felt very long, something I had never experienced before. The clients and my staff were already situated in the conference room when I arrived and knocked on the door, and everyone's eyes were on me. When they questioned why I was late, I told them about what had transpired in the park. Kevin didn't believe me, but my team did. "Kyle, why in the world did you make the customer wait? A high school graduate is worthless because of this," he claimed. I lowered my head in apology, but Kevin continued his rant. "You're not even able to arrive on time. I understand why you are unable to find a girlfriend. With that mindset, you will always be unmarried. And that hideous tie, really. Try to look respectable, at least." He persisted in disparaging me and bringing up other topics. At last, he scoffed, "Aiding someone who was homeless? Create a better falsehood, at the very least. Homeless women aren't just lying around all over the place." I kept bowing and apologizing to the client while Kevin continued to scold me. Everyone had received their presentation materials by the time I got there, and Kevin was getting ready to start the presentation. Kevin's main responsibility as a manager was to provide the documents because he was incapable of handling their preparation. Something didn't feel quite right as I turned through the materials. Hold on, something is wrong. I thought, something's wrong. I began to fear as I was going over the documentation, but the client immediately saw the disparity and spoke up. "Kevin, it appears that the materials we have in front of us don't match the presentation you're giving." Realizing this, Kevin took a quick look at the papers. Indeed, they were not the same as what he was showcasing. Only the areas I had been in charge of were incorrect, according to a closer look. Kevin bowed to the client and stated, "We sincerely apologize for the oversight in distributing incomplete materials." The customer said, "We'll need to think about it," in response to his request for an opportunity to rework the presentation at a later date. "You can leave for today." It was unimaginable to make such a basic error at the start of a $30 million project. After leaving the client's office, our group returned to headquarters. "You're fired, Kyle. I wish to never again see your face. You shouldn't have been involved in such a significant undertaking as a high school graduate. How will you accept accountability for a $30 million deal?" I was completely confident in the contents because I had properly planned everything and reviewed my work. I couldn't have made such a basic error because I had only looked over the docs the day before. Not a single one of my coworkers spoke to me. They had all given up their time and energy to labor late into the night on this project, so it made reasonable. I sincerely apologized and bowed to the team, but they all turned to leave in silence and returned to the office. I couldn't have changed the documents on the spot because they had already been disseminated, even if I hadn't been late that day. Kevin told Tyler the meeting specifics back at the office. Afterwards, Tyler summoned me to his office and instructed me to take a break. I apologized profusely and walked out of the office. I continued thinking about getting fired while I was at home, soaking in the bathtub. I was most likely going to be fired, even though I had put a lot of effort into getting hired by this organization. I got in front of my computer after taking a bath and looked through job advertisements, but every one of them required a college degree. With only a high school degree, I was unable to employ my existing talents in any position. It's not possible, I imagined. I went to bed discouraged. My mom paid me a visit a few days into my leave. She was concerned after I told her what had transpired on the phone. I prepared your favorite meal. Eat well and feel better. Before leaving for home, she reassured me, I'll always be by your side, no matter what. I didn't want to add to my already heavy load or cause her any more anxiety. I decided to go out for a change of scenery the following day because I was feeling stuck in my room and it wasn't helping me. I left home the next morning, but strangely, I did so at the same time I typically leave for work. As I stepped outside, I thought, Riley, my body remembers. It was very quiet on weekday mornings. The tranquility of a weekday morning let me realize how different the neighborhood felt as I walked the same path. Naturally, I followed my feet to the little park I frequently pass on my way to work. As I got closer to the bench, I noticed a woman sitting there, seemingly waiting for someone, even though I had intended to take a break there. There was only one bench in the park. I decided to keep walking and give up on sitting down after thinking, oh, someone's already sitting there. However, the woman abruptly got up and turned to face me as I was walking past. My breath caught in my throat as I looked at her. Her features were so remarkable that they nearly seemed otherworldly, making her the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen. I was shocked when she approached me and said, I really appreciate your assistance the other day. I truly wanted to thank you in person, which is why I've been waiting here. Before me, she bowed deeply. Oh, did I assist you in any way? I couldn't remember ever being of assistance to someone so lovely. I remained silent for a minute, thinking, perhaps she's confusing me with someone else. She went on to say that I had phoned the ambulance when she passed out the other day. Oh, that day's homeless woman is you. It came to me at last. My name is Malign, the woman said. I introduced myself as Kyle and grinned uncomfortably in a moment of panic. Have you shed a few pounds? She inquired. Well, a lot has happened, I said hazily, attempting to dismiss it. Then, though, I felt compelled to tell her everything. She wasn't responsible for any of this after all. I should have double-checked the paperwork because I knew I was responsible for the confusion. But for some reason, I felt compelled to tell her how frustrated I was. I described what had happened that day, the document incident, and how I got into this predicament. Milene listened to my narrative, then glanced down and said, I'm so sorry, it's my fault, in a sobbing voice. I snapped back to reality when I saw the despair on her face. With a surge of self-loathing for bothering her with my problems, I asked myself, why did I tell her all of this? No, you are not to blame. I frantically tried to convince her that this was all my fault, but she continued to keep her head down. She slowly raised her head while I was second-guessing what I had spoken. We looked at each other for a moment. My pulse raced at the sight of her pure, lovely eyes. It's strange for your section chief, Kevin, to reprimand you like that in front of the client, she said. Based on what you've told me, I believe Kevin is suspicious. The fact that the documents you put so much effort into creating were abruptly replaced is incomprehensible. She listened to me and remarked that although I had no evidence linking Kevin to the incident, he seemed suspect. I don't think I could have moved the documents by accident, but I also don't have any proof that Kevin did it. I can't do anything but express my gratitude for your concern. Her face became more serious. Kevin did it, that much is certain. He most likely couldn't tolerate having someone with less education tell him what to do. There are many like him, particularly among the sons of affluent households, she asserted. Sons of wealthy families. She must come from a distinguished family, of course. She's out of my league, my mind said. Kyle, I'll assist you. Together, let's conquer this, she said, grasping my hand. As she squeezed it firmly, I just stared in bewilderment. I was certain that my face would have been a fiery red if I had a mirror. The company called me unexpectedly the following day and asked me to come in right away. I was instructed to go to the president's office as I hurried to the office. I rapped on the door and stepped inside. Inside, I noticed our client from the most recent meeting, Mr. Harrison, looking stern, and Kevin, looking pale. It was Malign, standing next to the customer. Mr. Harrison came over to me and began to talk. Both Tyler and your coworkers have told me everything. I now comprehend the circumstances. It's not your fault. Kevin was responsible for everything. I realized the reality as I glanced around at everyone's faces. Kevin was the one. He switched the papers. Mr. Harrison described the incident. Kevin was furious that a high school graduate had been chosen to be his mentor since he had joined the company through family ties. The thought of someone with less education ordering him was intolerable to him. He became enraged when he realized that I, a recent high school graduate, was involved in a $30 million project. In order to sabotage me, he devised a scheme to have me sent to a distant branch and derail the project by replacing just the documents I had provided. He had even offered his coworkers money to help him draft alternative documents, but they had all politely declined. Without anyone to assist him, Kevin had produced and disseminated the fictitious documents on his own. When some of his coworkers told Tyler about the incident, this information became public knowledge. Tyler was hesitant to tell Mr. Harrison about it, though, particularly because he lacked concrete proof. Kevin had assigned most of his job to his subordinates, thus he hardly grasped our company's structure. When the data for the fictitious reports was discovered undamaged following the restoration of Kevin's folder, the fact that he had improperly erased the papers became vital evidence. Mr. Harrison concluded his explanation, and then Malign spoke. She had heard my story the day before and understood that the transaction concerned her father's business and ours. She told her father how I had aided her and begged him to give me another chance when she returned home. Sensing that something was wrong, her father had asked Mr. Harrison to look into it, which is how Kevin's dishonesty was discovered. Hold on, she is the daughter of the client company's president, Mr. Hudson. I couldn't help but be overpowered by the circumstances as I listened. Malign trailed behind me as I left the room when the conversation was over. Then she gave me the whole tale. Her father had been adamantly pressuring her to marry a stranger in an arranged marriage. She rebelled and fled from home with no money, wandering aimlessly for days since she didn't want to marry someone she didn't feel anything for. To save herself from starving, she drank water from a fountain in the park. She finally had enough and passed out in the park, where I discovered her. Upon her admission to the hospital, the physicians determined that she had acute gastritis and stomach ulcers brought on by malnourishment and stress. She paid her medical costs with the money I provided her, but as soon as she left the hospital, her parents' hired searcher discovered her and took her home. She informed me she felt much better now and could even go back to her favorite BBQ. Malign wanted to express her gratitude to me face to face, so she had been waiting in the park every day during my regular journey. Mr. Hudson came up behind me as we were conversing. I made selfish decisions without taking my daughter's feelings into account, even though all I wanted was for her to be happy. I feel embarrassed. I'm grateful that you saved her. I would be thrilled to collaborate with you directly, he added, shaking my hand. After a brief moment of hesitation, I shook his hand. We lined and I started going out to eat after that, and soon we started dating. I couldn't resist asking her a question that had been on my mind one day when we were having lunch at a cafe. What made you volunteer to assist me that day? You may have simply said, "Thank you," and moved on. After giving me a serious look, she started to explain. I discovered the business transaction was with my father's company when I heard your narrative that day. I felt accountable for what had transpired as well. After hearing you, I was positive that you weren't at fault for the error. Therefore, I wanted my father to look into it and find out the truth. You were so lovely that I wanted to help you more than anything else. As a stranger, you helped me by taking me to the bench and even covering my medical expenses. Her face softened as she looked down shyly as she spoke. I found myself gazing at her in adoration and couldn't help but feel a strong fondness for her. Mr. Hudson's strong recommendation led to my appointment as the project's head, and I got to work advancing it. Some coworkers were jealous and remarked on how fortunate I was to be with someone so attractive after learning that I was seeing the client's daughter. However, they all applauded me and laughed, stating that it made sense in the situation. Recalling my father's advice, even if someone betrays you, never betray others, enabled me to let go of my hatred toward Kevin for what he did, but I would be dishonest if I claimed I didn't. After a while, Kevin was demoted and transferred to a distant branch, where he received the same retraining as new hires. He was left to live a lonely existence after his family and fiancée abandoned him, and his pay and bonuses were cut to match those of the newcomers. On the anniversary of my father's passing, my mother and I are currently driving to his burial. I want to let him know that Malign and I are engaged. My mother speaks abruptly as she silently looks out the window. I never thought all of this would result from that occurrence. There are many surprises in life. Looking up into the sky through the window, she whispers, "I'm sure your father is grinning down on us now." "Dad, you don't have to worry anymore." I mutter softly to myself while holding on to the driving wheel. I now realize that I caused Mom to worry and feel alone for a long time. Now that I've discovered someone I love, I'll keep her and Mom safe. You can relax, Dad. As I stared at the stunning blue sky outside the windshield, I muttered these words to myself.